My son, Jason, married Chloe 2 years ago. I thought getting hitched at 20 was a fool's errand, a mad dash to the altar fueled by cheap beer and cheaper dreams. But of course, no one listened to me. Jason was determined to build a family, and so he did. The small condo my own mother had left me, I'd signed it over to him before the wedding. It wasn't much, a shoebox in a part of town that was perpetually up and coming, but never quite arrived. But it was a start. A foundation. For a year, the newlyweds nested in that little box, playing house. Then they got the bright idea to invest in a new construction development. A dream home, they called it. A 2-story mirage on the far edge of the suburbs. Jason sold the condo, and Chloe's parents, the ever-supportive Davidsons, chipped in a respectable sum. My former in-laws, a pair of smiling vipers, tried to pressure me, whispering about how the children need our help. I had helped. I gave my son a home, a tangible asset I could have rented out for my own retirement. But a mother's love is a currency you're always expected to spend. I never trusted those new developments. It felt like a scam, handing over real, hard-earned money for a blueprint and a patch of dirt. How could you buy a house that wasn't even built? But people did it. And so, my son and his wife poured their life savings into a promise, rented a small apartment to bridge the gap, and started making payments on a ghost. No problems were expected. That was the mantra. No problems. Then the storm hit. Chloe was laid off, a casualty of some corporate restructuring, and their carefully balanced financial world began to tilt. The rent, the construction payments, the car loans, it all started to press in on them. That's when the call came. Jason's voice on the other end, thin and strained. "Mom, can we stay with you for a little while?" I knew with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut that this would be a disaster. I don't flatter myself. I know I'm not an easy person to live with. My life is a carefully curated collection of routines and rituals, a fortress built against the chaos of the world. But Jason knew that. He grew up in this fortress. If he was asking to come back, it meant he was desperate. It was telling that they weren't running to Chloe's mother. I never pried into the dynamics of that family, but the silence spoke volumes. From the very first day, I laid down the law. My house, my rules. It wasn't a negotiation. I go to bed at 10 o'clock. After that, the house is a tomb. I'm a light sleeper, and once I'm awake, sleep is a distant country I can't find my way back to. During the day, the classical radio station plays. It's the soundtrack of my life, a constant, soothing hum in the background. Simple things, non-negotiable things. They nodded, their faces pale with gratitude and exhaustion. We began to live together. The first month was a fragile peace treaty. They tiptoed around my routines, a pair of ghosts in their own home. If they left a wet towel on the floor or forgot to wipe down the counter, I would point it out, my voice calm and even, and they would scurry to fix it. We coexisted, but by the second month, the treaty began to fray. The ghosts started to grow teeth. Chloe, emboldened by a new part-time job, began to talk back. Jason, my own son, started sighing. His frustration a sharp percussive sound in the quiet house. "Can we please not descend into madness?" He'd snap. "What's going to happen if you miss one day of the radio?" You don't even listen to it, it just drones on. My head is splitting after a long day. Why do we have to wipe the dishes dry when they'll just air dry on their own? Chloe would challenge, her tone a mix of genuine curiosity and thinly veiled condescension. It just seems like a waste of time. We could be doing something more productive. "Mom, do you have to start the deep clean at 9 a.m. on a Saturday?" Jason would groan from his bedroom. "We're trying to sleep. It's barely morning and you're out there like a drill sergeant with a Swiffer." The dialogues, these little skirmishes, multiplied. Each one was a small crack in the foundation of our arrangement. I felt my own home, my sanctuary, turning into a battleground. The tension was a physical presence, a thick, suffocating blanket I couldn't throw off. Finally, I broke. "Pack your things," I said one evening, my voice dangerously quiet. The radio was off. The silence was louder than any music. Jason stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. "You're just going to kick us out? Onto the street? Because we broke a few of your ridiculous rules?" "They're not ridiculous rules," I said, my voice gaining strength. "They are the rules of my house. The house you came to as guests, promising to respect them. Why should I be forced to feel uncomfortable in my own home? You could have tried to understand," he shot back, his voice rising. "We didn't come here for fun. We're going through a hard time." "People who are going through a hard time are grateful for any help they can get," I retorted, the words sharp and cold. "They don't start making demands and talking back to the person who took them in." "I warned you from the beginning, Jason. My house, my rules." His face hardened, the soft lines of my son replaced by the sharp angles of a stranger. "You just wanted us gone. You did everything you could to make us leave." "Fine, I get it. Thanks for the help, Mom. Don't worry, I won't be asking again." He spun around and started yanking clothes from the closet, his movements jerky and violent. Chloe, her face pale and tear-streaked, joined him, a silent, furious partner in their exodus. They left that night, and I did not regret my decision. They came to me for help, not the other way around. I asked for nothing unnatural, only that they respect the established order of my life. Perhaps it was uncomfortable for them, but the alternative was for me to be uncomfortable. And in my own home, I refused to be a guest. When they have their own house, they can make their own rules, but not under my roof. The silence they left behind was profound. It was more than just the absence of their footsteps or their whispered arguments. It was a hollow ache in the center of my chest. For weeks, I told myself I was right. I replayed the arguments, the sighs, the eye rolls, and with each replay, my conviction hardened. They were ungrateful, entitled. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. My son, the boy I had raised, had looked at me with such contempt. The memory was a shard of glass in my heart. A month after they left, I got a call from Sarah, Chloe's mother. Her voice was tight, strained. "Brenda, we need to talk." We met at a sterile coffee shop halfway between our homes. Sarah looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, a tremor in her hand as she lifted her cup. "They're living with us now," she said. No preamble. "It's difficult." "I can imagine," I said, a bitter satisfaction curling in my stomach. "No, you can't," she snapped, her composure cracking. "Brenda, Chloe is pregnant." The world tilted. The clatter of the coffee shop faded to a dull roar. Pregnant. My mind raced back through the past few months. The fatigue, the mood swings I had attributed to stress and unemployment. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. "She's about 3 months along," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She didn't want to tell you. She was afraid you'd... I don't know. Judge her. Be angry about the timing." "Angry?" I whispered. "A baby, a grandchild." The word felt foreign on my tongue. A wave of something warm and unfamiliar washed over me. A flicker of joy in the cold landscape of my anger. "They can't afford it," Sarah said flatly, dashing the flicker before it could catch. "They're broke, Brenda. The down payment on the house wiped them out. The construction is delayed, and Chloe's part-time job barely covers their car payment. They're living in our guest room. A baby is a financial catastrophe." I stared at her. At this woman I barely knew, who was laying my family's crisis bare on a sticky coffee shop table. "So what are you suggesting?" Sarah leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine. She needs to terminate the pregnancy. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and obscene. What? It's the only sensible option, she said, her voice gaining a chillingly practical tone. They can't give a child a good life right now. It would be selfish. They need to get back on their feet, get their house built, and then they can think about starting a family. This was a mistake. A mistake? I echoed, my voice trembling with a rage I didn't know I possessed. It's not a mistake. It's my grandchild. It's a collection of cells that is going to ruin their lives, Sarah countered, her voice like ice. And Jason agrees. That was the blow that shattered me. Jason, my son. He agreed. He would erase his own child for the sake of financial convenience. The boy who had been so determined to build a family was now willing to tear it down before it even began. He's just scared, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. He's under pressure. He's being realistic, she corrected. Something you apparently are not. We've already discussed it with them. They're leaning that way? But Chloe is hesitant. She's emotional. She needs a united front. She needs to hear it from you, too. She needs to know that everyone agrees this is the best, the only path forward. She wanted me to be her accomplice. She wanted me to march into that house and convince the mother of my grandchild to kill her baby. The audacity of it stole my breath. No, I said. The word is stone. Brenda, be reasonable. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. Get away from me. I left her there, sitting in that soulless coffee shop, and drove home in a blind fury. The carefully constructed walls of my fortress were crumbling around me. My rules, my routines, my quiet, ordered life, it all seemed so petty, so meaningless in the face of this. A life was at stake. My own blood. I tried to call Jason. He didn't answer. I texted him, my thumbs fumbling on the screen. Jason, we need to talk. It's about the baby. His reply came an hour later. There is no baby. Not yet. And there won't be. It's for the best, Mom. Please stay out of it. Stay out of it. Stay out of the existence of my own grandchild. The betrayal was a physical pain, a twisting in my gut far worse than any anger I had felt before. He had sided with them, with the smiling vipers who saw a baby not as a blessing, but as a line item on a budget. I couldn't sleep. The silence of my house was no longer a comfort, it was a condemnation. Every tick of the clock was a countdown to an unspeakable act. I saw my grandchild's face in the shadows, a tiny, unformed ghost haunting the halls of my perfect, empty home. I had to do something. My rules had driven them away, and now their desperation was driving them to this. My pride, my stubbornness, had cost me more than just a few months of discomfort. It had cost me my family. The next morning, I drove to Sarah and David's house. It was a large, imposing colonial in a wealthy suburb, the kind of place that made my own modest home feel like a servant's quarters. I walked up the manicured stone path and rang the bell, my heart hammering against my ribs. David, Chloe's father, answered the door. He was a tall, handsome man with a politician's smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Brenda, this is a surprise. I need to see them, I said, pushing past him into the marble-floored foyer. I don't think that's a good idea, he said, his smile tightening. They're going through a lot. We're handling it. Handling it? I spun on him, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. You're handling it by pressuring my son and his wife to have an abortion? From the top of the grand staircase, Sarah appeared. Brenda, you need to lower your voice. You are a guest in our home. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. A guest? Is that what I am? I'm the grandmother of the baby you're trying to eliminate. Jason and Chloe peered behind her, drawn by the commotion. Chloe looked pale and fragile, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. Jason's face was a thundercloud of anger and shame. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he demanded. "I told you to stay out of this." "I can't," I said, my eyes pleading with him. "Jason, don't do this. Please, we can figure it out. I can help." "Help?" Sarah laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Like you helped before? By throwing them out on the street over a wet towel?" "That was a mistake," I said, the admission costing me a mountain of pride. I was wrong. I was rigid and selfish. But this is different. This is a life. "It's our life, Mom." Jason's voice cracked. "Our mess. We have nothing. The house is a money pit, we're drowning in debt, and we're living in my in-laws' guest room. How is that a life for a baby?" "It's not about the money," I insisted, turning to Chloe. "Chloe, please, don't let them do this to you. To your baby." Chloe looked from me to her parents, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She was a pawn in their game, a child caught between warring kingdoms. "Brenda, you're upsetting her," David said, his voice taking on a menacing edge. "This is a private family matter, and you are not part of this family." That was it, the final unforgivable line. He had drawn a circle around them, my son included, and left me on the outside. "I am his mother," I said, my voice low and shaking with fury. "And that is my grandchild. You will not take that away from me." I looked at Jason, the son I no longer recognized. "You are letting them poison you. They don't care about you, they care about appearances, about their perfect daughter having a perfect life. This baby is an inconvenience to their master plan." "That's enough," David boomed, stepping towards me. "I think you should leave." "I'm not leaving without my son," I said, standing my ground. But Jason wouldn't look at me. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, a puppet whose strings were held by his smiling, venomous in-laws. He had made his choice. He had chosen them. The fight that followed was ugly. Voices were raised. Accusations were thrown like stones. I begged, I reasoned, I raged. I offered them everything. I told them they could move back in with me. No rules, no conditions. I would sell my house, give them the money, anything to stop this madness. But my words were meaningless. They were a wall of smiling, reasonable condescension. They had already decided. I was just a hysterical woman, an obstacle to be managed. In the end, they wore me down. David threatened to call the police. Jason, my son, stood by and said nothing. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, hollow despair. I looked at Chloe one last time, her face a silent scream of anguish, and I knew I had lost. I walked out of that house, each step an agony. The world seemed to have lost its color. The manicured lawns, the perfect houses, they were all a lie. A facade hiding a rotten core. I had not only lost a grandchild I would never meet, I had lost my son. He was a stranger to me now, a man who would sacrifice his own child on the altar of convenience and social pressure. The silence in my car on the drive home was the sound of a family dying. The days that followed were a blur of grief. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence was a fitting tribute to the silence in my womb, the silence of a future that would never be. I wandered through my house, my perfect, ordered house, and saw nothing but ghosts. The ghost of my son as a little boy, the ghost of a grandchild who would never laugh in these halls. I thought about my own life, the choices I had made. I had built my fortress of rules to protect myself from the chaos of the world, but in the end, it had only isolated me. I had pushed away the one person who mattered most, And in doing so, I had given his enemies the power to destroy him. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. My pride had cost me everything. A week later, a small, crisp envelope arrived in the mail. It was from a law firm. Inside, a single sheet of paper informed me that Jason and Chloe were filing for a restraining order against me. Harassment, it said. Emotional distress. The words were a clinical, legalistic translation of my heartbreak. They were not only erasing my grandchild, they were erasing me. The rage came back then, hot and clean. It burned away the grief, leaving behind a core of pure, unadulterated fury. They thought they could just cut me out, dispose of me like a piece of trash. They thought I would just fade away into my quiet, lonely life. They were wrong. I found a lawyer, a bulldog of a woman named Maria who specialized in messy family disputes. I told her everything. The condo, the pressure from the in-laws, the pregnancy, the abortion, the restraining order. She listened patiently, her face impassive. "They have a weak case for a restraining order," she said when I was finished. "But that's not the real fight, is it?" "No," I said. "The real fight is for my son." "Your son is an adult," Maria said gently. "He's made his choice, but his in-laws, they've played a very dirty game. And we can play dirty too." She started digging. She hired a private investigator. She looked into David and Sarah's finances, their business dealings, their perfect manicured lives. And she found something. Something big. David's wealth, it turned out, was not as stable as it appeared. His construction company was over-leveraged, teetering on the brink of collapse. The new development my son and Chloe had invested in was one of his projects. And it was failing. The delays weren't just delays, they were a sign of a much deeper rot. He was using new investor money to cover old debts, a classic Ponzi scheme. My son's life savings, Chloe's parents' contribution, it was all gone, swallowed up by David's desperate attempt to stay afloat. The abortion, the pressure, the united front, it all made a new, horrifying kind of sense. A baby would have brought scrutiny. Financial questions. It would have exposed the fact that they were not the wealthy, stable family they pretended to be. They were frauds. The baby wasn't a financial catastrophe for Jason and Chloe, it was a threat to David and Sarah's entire house of cards. They weren't protecting their daughter's future, they were protecting their own lives. Armed with this information, I was ready for a war. Maria arranged a meeting. Not in a coffee shop, not in a sterile law office, but at their house. My lawyer, their lawyer, and the whole broken family gathered in the opulent living room that felt more like a stage set than a home. I walked in not as a grieving mother, but as an executioner. I looked at David, at his smug, confident smile, and I felt nothing but contempt. I looked at my son, his face drawn and pale, and I felt a surge of pity. He was a fool, but he was my fool. "We're here to discuss the restraining order," their lawyer began, a slick, silver-haired man who looked like he was born in a suit. "No," Maria said, her voice cutting through the pleasantries. "We're here to discuss fraud." She laid it all out. The failing company, the Ponzi scheme, the stolen investments. She had bank records, internal documents, testimony from disgruntled former employees. The evidence was irrefutable. David's face went from tan to ashen. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. Jason stared at the documents. Maria spread across the coffee table, his face a mask of dawning horror. He looked at his father-in-law, the man he had trusted, the man for whom he had sacrificed his own child, and saw him for what he was, a thief. "You knew," Jason whispered, his voice hoarse. "You knew the whole time. The money was already gone." David didn't answer. He just stared at the papers, his empire crumbling around him. "The baby." Jason's voice broke. "We did it for nothing. You made us do it for nothing." Chloe started to sob, a raw animal sound of pure agony. She looked at her parents, her face contorted with a betrayal so profound it was almost impossible to witness. They had not only encouraged her to end her pregnancy, they had done it to cover their own crimes. They had sacrificed their own grandchild to save themselves. This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, it helps uncover more hidden family truths. The confrontation I had imagined, the one where I would rage and scream, never happened. There was no need. The truth was a bomb that had detonated in the center of their perfect lives, and all I had to do was watch the fallout. Jason stood up, his body trembling. He walked over to Chloe, pulled her to her feet, and held her as she wept. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her parents. He just looked at the door. "We're leaving," he said, his voice hollow. And they did. They walked out of that house, out of that life with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the devastating weight of what they had done. They left behind the ruins of two families, a testament to the destructive power of secrets and lies. The aftermath was a quiet devastation. David's company collapsed, taking a dozen other family savings with it. He and Sarah were facing a mountain of lawsuits and the very real possibility of prison time. Their perfect life was a smoking crater. Jason and Chloe disappeared. For months, I heard nothing. My calls went unanswered, my texts unread. The restraining order was dropped, a forgotten casualty of a much larger war, but the silence that replaced it was just as painful. I had won. I had exposed the truth, but I had lost my son all the same. I sold my house. The fortress I had built was a prison, and I couldn't bear to live in it anymore. The silence was too loud. I bought a smaller place, a little cottage by the sea, and tried to build a new life from the wreckage of the old one. I volunteered at a local community center. I took up painting. I tried to fill the gaping hole in my life with anything that wasn't grief. One day, about a year after the world had fallen apart, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mom." It was Jason. His voice was different, older, quieter, stripped of the arrogance and anger I remembered. "Jason," I breathed, sinking into a chair. "We're in Oregon," he said. "We moved, started over. Are you okay?" I asked, the question feeling ridiculously inadequate. He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we're trying." "Chloe's in therapy." "I probably should be." "We're working." "Trying to?" "I don't know. Trying to live with it." "The money." I started, but he cut me off. "It's gone, Mom. All of it. We don't care. We're working service jobs. We have a tiny apartment. It's honest." We talked for an hour. He didn't apologize, not in words, but his voice was an apology. His call was an apology. He told me about their life, the quiet, painful process of rebuilding from nothing. He told me Chloe had started planting a garden. He told me he had nightmares. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't ask for money or help. He just wanted to talk, to reconnect, to let me know he was still alive. We started talking more regularly after that. Short, tentative calls that slowly grew longer, more comfortable. We didn't talk about the baby. We didn't talk about his in-laws. We talked about the weather, about our jobs, about the things you talk about when the most important things are too painful to say. One day, he told me they were thinking of coming to visit, just for a weekend. My heart leaped. They came on a bright, sunny Saturday. Jason looked thinner, his face etched with lines that hadn't been there before. Chloe was quiet, her eyes holding a deep, permanent sadness. But she smiled at me, a real, genuine smile. We walked on the beach. We ate dinner at my small kitchen table. It was awkward and strange, a pantomime of a family trying to remember how to be a family. That night, after Jason had gone to bed, Chloe and I sat on the porch, listening to the waves. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I told her, my own voice thick. "I was weak," she said, looking out at the dark water. "I let them convince me. I let them." I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. I didn't have an answer. I just reached out and took her hand. It was cold. We sat there for a long time, two women bound together by a ghost, by a love that was both a wound and a bridge. They left the next day. As they were getting in their car, Jason hugged me. It wasn't the perfunctory hug of a son leaving his mother. It was the desperate, clinging hug of a man who had been lost at sea and had finally found a lighthouse. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too," I said, holding on as tightly as I could. I watched them drive away down the long coastal road until their car was just a speck in the distance. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if our family could ever truly heal. The scars were too deep, the ghosts too real. But as I stood there, with the salt spray on my face and the sound of the ocean in my ears, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't peace. It was hope, a tiny fragile seed planted in the barren soil of our grief. And for now, it was enough.